Hi everyone, it's Professor Horlacher here, and today I'm going to talk about how to use the 5/7 chord. And in order to demonstrate that, I've got a nice little opening of an aria by Giuseppe Verdi, V-E-R-D-I. Verdi was an Italian composer in the 19th century, very famous for his operas, and this is one of his most famous operas. Let's see if we can get that pen to work there. That's an L there. The name is Rigoletto, name of the main character in the opera. This is an opening aria very near the beginning of the piece in the first act, and it's the introduction we get to the Duke. Rigoletto works for the Duke, and the Duke is obviously somebody with a lot of status. We can see here he's singing with elegance. He's trying to show what an elegant man he is. And he's got a text here. In my heart, all are equally cherished. Every thought of exclusion within me I smother. And he's talking about women here. He's trying to say all women are beautiful to me, and I would never imagine excluding anyone from my heart. Now, it turns out that that is not a very good quality of his in the opera, as we'll see. But he's trying to be very bouncy and happy here. And before we start talking about it, I think I'll give you a little performance. Not in my very best voice, but at least you'll get a chance to hear it. And also, if you go back to the Week 5 schedule, you'll find a link to a performance that we did here at IU a few years ago. And so you can also click on that and hear the whole orchestra. Okay, here we go. There we go. And I took it down a little bit so it's not quite as high, so I didn't have to sing as high, if you're wondering about the range. Okay. You can see that this is a very bouncy kind of rhythm going along. And as we've seen in the past couple of weeks, there are lots of ways of making a long stretch of one. Look how long this stretch of one goes on, all the way to the end of this bar right here. Lots of ways of making things interesting. And this is the Duke being very happy and showing us. Here's a passing tone in the one. Here's a really nice passing tone, or excuse me, a neighbor tone. It comes on the beat. Right? In 6/8, this is the start of the second beat. So it comes in an emphasized place, and it comes up from scale degree all the way to up from 5 up to 6. Gives it a little kind of jest. Here's another passing tone, and look how he uses that neighbor tone here, not even in a complete way. Try to show what a free kind of guy he is. When he finally does change harmony, and here is that 5/7 chord. Let's take a look. We're in the key of A flat major, and so we build a chord on E flat, and we know that 5 is E flat, G, B flat. In this case, we're going to add the 7th above it, D flat, and here it is in the piano part. But look, he also gets to sing the 7th. As a matter of fact, he leaps right into it from chord tone scale degree 5 up to 7. And one thing we know about 7ths is that they're dissonant and they need to resolve down by step. So in a 5/7 chord, the scale degree of the 7th is scale degree 4, and it needs to go down to 3. Now, where does he resolve it? This right here is not the resolution down to C. You can see that that 5/7 harmony lasts a little bit. This is just a passing tone where he fills in the gap that he created earlier. Here is the resolution to scale degree 3. And I don't know, I think this is kind of a little joke that he jumps up onto the 7th of the chord, scale degree 4. Notice there's an accent on there, on the word exclusion. I would never exclude And so therefore, to prove that, I'm going to resolve that dissonance down to scale degree 3. And, in fact, in the piano part, the same thing happens. So there's an example of how 5/7 is such a fun chord to use. Now let's go to the next slide. Here are some typical things that go wrong when people use 5/7 chords. You can see by mistake, I wrote one of them in there twice. I must have thought it was very important. Number 9 is in there also as number 7. But the thing to remember is that 5/7 has in its scale degrees 5, 7, the leading tone, 2, and 4, these are scale degrees, the 7th. And so that means there are 2 members of it that have to be treated carefully. Scale degree 4, the 7th, needs to resolve down to scale degree 3 when the harmony goes from 5/7 to 1. The leading tone, this is a tendency tone we know as well. It's the 3rd of the chord, scale degree 7. It needs to go up in outer parts. In an inner part, we can bring it down, and when that happens, it's called frustrating the leading tone, because instead of going up to 7, up to 8, it goes down to 5, and that can happen in an inner part. So here are the things that may not happen if you don't use the 5/7 carefully. The 7th doesn't resolve. There it is. That doesn't sound very connected. I want that note to resolve down by step. We know about parallel octaves and fifths, and we're going to have to watch carefully them, as you'll see in the 3rd slide. Be careful of your spelling, since we have 4 pitches here, and also be careful of your doubling. You'd never want to double the leading tone, and you never want to double the 7th of the chord. There is a circumstance in which you may omit the 5th of the chord, which is scale degree 2, and double the root. We'll see that in the next slide. Okay. Leading tones need to resolve in outer parts, but as I said earlier, in inner parts they don't need to. Make sure your chord has a 3rd. Never double a dissonance. And remember that 5/7, it's an intensification of 5. So once we get that 7th in there, we don't go back to 5 and leave it unresolved. Okay, let's just do a little bit of voice leading. Here's the next slide. In the key of B flat, let's resolve 5/7 in 2 ways. Okay. Let's spell the chord. Scale degree 5 is F, and we have a leading tone, A. Scale degree 2, the 5th of the chord, scale degree 2, and the 7th of the chord is E flat, and we know that that needs to resolve down to D. All right. I'm going to put that 7th in the soprano, where it's really, really audible. Now, I know that the 7th needs to come down. Okay, that's a given. And I'm going to resolve this to a root position 1 chord, so my outer parts are written for me here. I'd like to have a complete chord if I could, but what happens if I do that? I want to be very careful not to have parallel fifths, so I'll leap down. I'll frustrate the leading tone in the alto down to scale degree 5, and then I'm able to double the root. And that's permissible. Then I have 2 complete chords. Let's try this one. All I've done here in this case is switch around the alto and the tenors, or excuse me, the alto and the soprano part, so that the 7th is now in the alto and the leading tone is now in the soprano. And I'll start out with the same spacing in the other 2 parts. 7th must go down. Okay. Leading tone must go up in this case because now it's in an outer part. Well, if I want to have a complete chord, this is what I'm missing, the fifth of the chord, and the doubling the root. I've created a terrible error here, which is parallel fifths. So, in this particular case, what I do is I don't want parallel fifths. This voice is a given, this voice is a given, this voice is a given. And so, this is a case where I'll end up tripling the root and omitting the fifth of the chord. And this is the correct resolution from a 5/7 that has a leading tone in the soprano. Okay, that'll get us started, and I'll see you in class.